All right. Today we're going to be talking about something that's very near and dear to my heart. And that is hospitality. Why is this near and dear to my heart, you might ask? Well, hold on. Give me 1 second. There we go. Why is this near and dear to my heart, you might ask? Well, that is because for about 7 years before I took over Maiden, I had a job working in this restaurant slash bar slash club. If you're from my area, you probably know the place I'm talking about because there's not that many of these around here. But if not, that's fine too, because that's not the point of this conversation that we're having today. We're also going to be lightly covering the book titled Unreasonable Hospitality. This is a book written by former co-owner Will Guidara about 11 Madison Park, the famous restaurant in New York, one of the most notoriously hospitable restaurants in the world. This is also your common general manager if you work in a restaurant. It is their Bible. It is the thing that they are glued to and base all of their teaching knowledge off of. Most likely, maybe not. But more often than not, that's the case. Nowadays, Will is no longer co-owner, and I'm pretty sure that the head chef, who's the current owner now, is like a vegan, and that's really been the most of the focus that they've been taking their business into, which is kind of a bummer because it lost some of its charm that it used to have. But that's just how things go. Businesses change, people change. That's the nature of things, whether it's good or bad. But this place still has a reputation for having great hospitality for its guests. It's not as good as it was. One of the reasons being that this restaurant is very expensive. I'm talking about over $1,000 for a two-person meal, which is crazy. Maybe nowadays, not as crazy as it was maybe like 5 years ago. But you are not going to see these types of prices in a coffee shop. That doesn't mean that these aren't going to apply to your situation. They still do. I'm going to be providing a few examples that the book uses, and we're just going to lightly go over things as well as some real life examples that I went through and why it's so important during your time working within hospitality, because whether you work at a fine dining restaurant or a coffee shop, you're still working within hospitality. It's all surrounded around the same idea. Why it's so important to focus on that sort of thing. This is a photo on the right of when I was working in restaurants, and we would do this thing where we'd stand up on the bar every Friday night. That's my friend John right below me. This is just to show you that there's many different forms of hospitality. It's not always just a fine dining experience. These are our core values at Made in Coffee. The first one, exceeding expectations. That is sort of like a callback to my time spent working in restaurants, just sort of like a way to recognize the book that we're talking about today, and just sort of to keep in mind that the standard needs to be set, but there's always expectations that you can go beyond during your time. Quick disclaimer, if you've seen any of these videos before, you know what I'm going to say already, so I'm just going to say it again. I am not an expert coffee entrepreneur that is going to make you millions of dollars. I'm a bit over 2 years into my professional coffee journey and can only speak on my own personal experiences. These are lessons that have helped me. That does not necessarily mean it's going to lead you to the same result. You still have to put the work in. I can only do so much to provide you or point you in the right direction, as well as provide you with some resources that will help you along the way. This is our framework for this mini series that we're doing. Last week we talked about sales. Today we're going to be talking about hospitality and all these subcategories that fall under it. This is just a bit of an outline of what we're going to be discussing over hopefully the next few weeks. We'll see how these go. So what does hospitality look like? You might be thinking this fine dining experience, or you also might be thinking this. There's many different forms of hospitality. It's not just this high-end luxury experience that you might be talking about. When we would do that every weekend, it was something that we came to be known for this idea of just like these over extravagant little things that we would be doing. We're going to talk more about that later, but just as of right now, just so you know that this can still apply to your experience. You don't have to be working at 11 Madison Park in New York, one of the most well-known restaurants in the world, in order to still apply some of these rules to your situation. So the first example in 11 Madison Park, the hot dog story, the infamous hot dog story. Some patrons at 11 Madison Park were on their last day of their trip to New York. During their time, they said that they'd done everything they wanted to do. They visited every restaurant that they've ever wanted to go to in New York. They just did not get a New York hot dog during their time. And it was their last day. They literally had all their suitcases with them. They were going to the airport right after this event. And the co-owner, Will Guidara, overheard this conversation as he was helping the bussers clean up plates. And he quickly ran down a few blocks down the street, got a famous New York hot dog, brought it back into 11 Madison Park, gave it to the chef, and told him that he needed to make this their final 15th course out of their 15-course meal. The chef, I'm sure, thought it was a joke, but he was dead serious. And they brought out this very well intricated or orchestrated plate of cut up hot dogs with probably ketchup and relish, as you'd find at a regular hot dog menu. And it made these people's life, according to them. They said that this was an experience. First, they were shocked because they had no idea. Obviously, he went up and spoke with them after the fact, Will Guidara, and they said how this was going to be an experience that they would remember for the rest of their lives. The second example is the lost stuffed animal example. A little girl with her parents when they were attending 11 Madison Park. She left behind her stuffed animal, and the 11 Madison Park team not only found it, but started to take pictures with it around the restaurant, creating this experience for this child when they finally returned it back to the family with the pictures to mitigate this experience that could have been pretty hard for this child, but elevated it and turned it to, again, an experience that they're probably going to remember for the rest of their lives, at least as long as they have that stuffed animal. The final examples that we're going over is just different types of tailored experiences that this core team at 11 Madison Park was known for doing. So if it was a birthday, an anniversary, a honeymoon, they would go and do whatever they could to find any sort of little detail that had to do with that experience, and they would cater it in towards their dining time at 11 Madison Park. If it was a favorite sports team, they would make a dessert out of it, or some sort of meal that was in the theme of that sports team. If it was, if somebody was going to be traveling to another a city or a place after, they would create a whole list of different restaurants or different places to travel to, very well made, and handed over to them at the end of their time at 11 Madison Park. Again, crafting a sort of tailored experience all to different customers during their time. So if you are like me a few years ago, you're probably thinking, who cares, right? Well, all of these examples boil down to the same idea, and that is utilizing exceptional customer service that ignites an emotional response to establish positive word-of-mouth marketing. This is how this works. You have an exceedingly positive experience. You tell your friends about it. They want to go visit your establishment because of that positive experience. They hopefully have one themselves. Now you have a new customer base, and the pattern continues. Word of mouth is everything. It is the backbone of marketing for business. Before you start spending money on ads, that is how you get new customers. When we would get on top of the bar at the place that I worked at before this, and we would spray champagne at people, that exceeded the expectations that they had for set at the beginning of the night. The standard was already set. We were a popular Jersey Shore club that played pretty good club music. Everything else was an addition, which came down to us as the bartenders. Whenever it was one of your customers' birthdays, We'd bring out a bottle of champagne with sparklers just as something special. We'd have a buyback system where you could pay for some people's drinks if you had like regulars or new people that you wanted to establish as regulars, just to kind of like sweeten the deal a little bit. It really came down to like the interaction that you had with the customers more than anything. But that was just like another thing that you could throw on top. Each bartender also had like this VIP list where their friends or people that they know could skip these very long lines that would be leading up to the club at night. So it would give them like it's almost like a flash pass at like Six Flags, essentially. But all of these little things were tied into this emotional, well, not necessarily emotional, because pretty much all of them were bombed by the end of the night, but they would remember at least one of these things that you did at the end of the night when they woke up the next morning. All of these things would kind of add on to this elevated experience that they did not expect after first attending this place. Unfortunately, things died out a bit after COVID, but we still had such momentum going from all these things that we did that even through the pandemic, I still remember, or after the pandemic, I still remember seeing a line leading up to the club, like wrapped around the restaurant or even wrapped around the block on certain Friday nights or holidays. The shortened version of everything that I'm talking about is that these little things add up, and the actions that you might think are corny or unimportant actually do matter and mean a lot more to people than you think. So if you can provide an exceptional experience to a customer and can also somehow tie it into triggering an emotional response, you will build an incredible reputation and you will be able to charge higher prices as well. Not that this is all about making money, but regardless of whether it's your passion or not, it's nice to be able to support yourself and the people that you love and be able to give back one day. Let's talk about when things go wrong. This is some AI generated images. You can't generate an angry person through Google's AI. I don't know if ChatGPT does it, but like it didn't accept that prompt. I thought that was kind of weird. I don't know if anybody else experiences that, but that's a customer shouting and then this one's surprised. I don't know. Yeah, let's go over when things go wrong. So congratulations, you've made a mistake. What do you do now? These are going to happen no matter what. But what's so great about it is that the quicker that you make mistakes, the quicker that you get better at your job. That needs to be your perspective. Of course, the goal is to avoid as many mistakes as possible, which you should, but there's always going to be things that you don't account for. So account for all that you can and prepare as much as possible, but understand no matter what, you're always going to be running through these experiences. So now that you've made the mistake, not only do you now have to make up for it, but you now have to exceed what's expected in making up for the mistake. And unfortunately, we live in a world where people have a very high expectation of things. When you mess up somebody's order or it does not taste correctly, you now need to do everything you can to make sure that person leaves with a positive emotional connection tied to your shop. Let's say you mess up somebody's drink order or it takes exceedingly long to come out. If it's one or the other, I would say $20 gift card right away. Now, of course, obviously, if there's a line out the door and there's nothing you can really do about it, you're not going to be giving people $20 gift cards as much as you can. But let's say one person's order gets lost in the mix. You forget about it. They obviously see other people that came in after them get their order before them. Absolutely. No questions asked. Now, if you were to combine the two, if you mess up the drink order and it takes longer than expected, $40 gift card immediately, maybe even more. That's up to you and the owner. If you are not, talk to them before you get through an experience like this and you'll start to understand it a little bit better, but especially if they complain. Absolutely. You are fighting the tide here. Yes. Thank you, Mitchell. Free cards, free coffee cards do go a long way. I could not agree more. It's like a gift that you're handing to somebody, especially if they complain. You're fighting the tide in this situation, right? Like all odds are against you and it's your fault. Even if it's not your fault, it's still your fault. Just take responsibility for it. Own up to the mistake and become the more upset person in that situation. Get angrier than they are, okay? Own up to it. Let them know that this is not a good representation of what we stand for, we as a collective, you and the business and your fellow employees. when you hand them this gift, ask them to give you one more chance, and you promise you'll make it right the next time, just to make sure that you make it right the next time. If you think this is overkill, I promise you it's not. The money that you will lose from that one negative experience alone will set you back exponentially more than the amount it costs you to make that person's day. If you are a relatively new coffee shop, you cannot afford one bad experience, not even one. Because now every time your coffee shop is brought up to that person within a conversation in their inner circle, they're going to speak about your coffee shop in a negative light. And now their friends are probably going to do the same without even having ever been to your coffee shop in the first place. That is word of mouth marketing at its core, okay? People are bored. They like to talk about drama whenever they can. And if one bad review alone takes about 12 positive ones to be outshined. You know how it's like a lot easier to remember a negative thing that you did or like a mistake that you made tied to a negative emotion compared to a positive one? It's kind of like the same idea that applies here. Well, it is. It's the same rule that applies here. It's the same reason why you have to have an outstandingly positive interaction with the customer in order for them to confidently tell people they know about it. A quick reality check here just to kind of like finish things off a little bit before we get to the Q&A portion of this. If you are a small independent coffee shop, you are constantly working against all odds. You have your competition, you have your negative customers, you have employees that don't care, you have a very saturated market, you have supply chain issues, and because of that saturated market, you are now in an industry that is constantly evolving and requiring you to do more. Really think about that before, if you were thinking about opening up a coffee shop. I don't mean to end this presentation in a negative light, but this is just the reality that a lot of business owners in general don't really realize when starting out. But if you can prepare yourself as much as possible, even though it will never be enough, and really work to provide an elevated experience to your customers, you will be able to uphold a high level standard, which will give you the ability to charge more money, which will then give you the ability to hire high level employees. And then you will be able, that's the negative interaction we were talking about, to make money as a business owner and hopefully have a successful business. There's obviously more that goes into it, but this is one component of that. And it all starts with holding a high level standard, which is why we have training programs. This is what I believe. You all can disagree with me, but if you do, I'd like to hear why. And that will take us to the Q&A portion of this talk. Alyssa says, what if your manager does not agree in giving out free things? I would work for a different coffee shop. I understand that like you don't want to be giving free gifts to just everyone or any customer that you might have an interaction with, and maybe there's other ways, but I would ask your manager an alternative to that. If it's not giving out free things, is it giving them discounts? Is it giving them, something else that has to be like the equivalent of that? And I don't think there's anything else besides that. The reason I think that is because you've now interfered with the rest of their day. It's now taken longer than they thought it was going to take if it's like a longer wait time. And it's starting to affect other hours of their day, which they can't get back. Which is why like even a free gift, depending on how much it costs, it might not even be worth the amount. Let's say you have somebody that's like a very high level white collar person whose hourly is obscenely high. Again, like you giving them that $20 gift card, it doesn't even account for the amount of money that they lost within that amount of time. And you should be treating everybody like that. But that's the same idea that you have to have when dealing with people, is that you're impeding on their time to a certain degree if you just forget about them or you don't get your drink out fast enough. Yeah, Mitchell says one free coffee can turn someone from never coming back to becoming a regular. Not doing that is the epitome of penny smart, dollar dumb. Yeah, that's exactly right. Reputation is everything in a coffee shop. And like I was saying before, I think your reputation for that first year, especially, is everything. Everything. Your goal is to get zero bad reviews, which might be very difficult, but I mean, every single interaction that you have with people matters. I wouldn't even look at that first year as a profit year. Like maybe break even. I mean, it's going to take a while for you in some cases to break even, but the focus should not be about making money that first year. The focus should be providing an exceptional experience to your customers. As a new owner, what are some key interview questions to ask baristas you want to hire to ensure you have a strong staff that is excited as you are about the cafe as you are? Sorry for the typos, mom brain. Yeah, no, that's a good question. So, like, what questions would you ask a new barista to kind of ensure that they care about the job as much as you do? You're never going to find anyone that cares about your business more than you do. That's impossible. But when I look to hire people on Maiden, I look for people that just have a good attitude more than anything. I look for people that are passionate and maybe other ways in their life, have hobbies that they're constantly doing. I look for people that before experience, I don't really care about experience, especially in like the food and beverage industry. I feel like from what I saw in my time within working hospitality is the people that have worked somewhere for like 5 to 10 years usually end up leaving pretty soon because they always think that they're like better than the place that they work at. That's why they're looking for a new job. I can't tell you how many times we've gotten new bartenders in the place that I was working and they'd be gone within a few months because they think the amount of money that they're making is not equal to the amount of expertise that they have within the industry. And the joke is that everything's always changing. So more than anything, I would look for somebody that is always able to keep a good attitude, is always able to just wanting to learn, just has like an incentive to just get better. Um, yeah, that's number one. Cool. Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, let me know what you guys think once this is all said and done. I like doing these. These are fun for me because this is like more of my day-to-day stuff. And like once we start creating these training programs, um, these will probably become more and more important. So anything that you disagree with or think should be focused on more in the future, let me know. I'm happy to go into detail on anything specific. And I appreciate you all for tuning in. Oh, link the book. Good, good idea. All right. Yeah, Unreasonable Hospitality. I think everybody should read this book. If anyone, let's get the Amazon link. If anyone is getting into running their own business or is just looking to open up, yeah, especially a hospitality based business, I would read this book just to kind of have like your standards in order, just so you understand how good it could actually be and what you should be striving for. This is a good place to start. I'll probably link this also after the video is done, whether it's in the comments or the info underneath the video. So, yeah, everybody should check out this book. It's a great one. And I think that's it. So, thank you.